Police brutality at its most explicit. A protester is shot and killed in the Sinai Desert during a peaceful protest, after running from armed police forces. The unrest in Egypt has escalated tremendously, causing unease with governmental officials. In Suez, a location not far east from the capital, groups of protesters furiously burned down government structures. Unlike the huge protests that erupted in Iran in 2009, Egypt's uprising is a movement that was born in a virtual world. Led by a young activist, Ahmad Salah, who understands the power of social networking.
Millions of Egyptian youth live on Facebook.
It initially started with a Facebook invite that stressed the need for actions of protest. As time passed, his Facebook messages were amplified by the widespread networking ability of social mediums such as Twitter, reaching more than 1 million audience members.
More than 1 in every 200 tweets on Twitter.
In the world.
And all the tweets in the world.
It was Egypt's urban youth population that initiated and led the protests. However, demands for change gained widespread support as the grassroots joined in the battle for equality. Peaceful Egyptian revolutions had a distinct goal, but no clear leader. Yet from the masses few emerged. A tweeter named Wael Ghonim was one of them. His tweets not only gave a first-hand account of what was happening in these protests, but also advocated for a supportive voice for protesters.
Sort of tweeting every day, almost every hour, and he's developed quite a mass of followers. He's become a figurehead of this revolt. I guess we can now call it a revolution.
It is generally acknowledged that Ghonim's Facebook page, titled "We Are All," Khalid said, sparked the protest. His page memorialized an Egyptian businessman who was beaten to death by police officials after threatening to expose the corruption within the Egyptian government. Ghonim's Facebook page called for a protest on January 25th, also known as the Day of Wrath. Thousands poured onto the streets and protested. However, not long after his protest, Ghonim was arrested on January 28th, and his release 12 days later only added to his legend.
We asked Whitney Brown, the Senior Director of Amnesty International, to comment on the role of social media in the Arab Spring uprisings.
We are seeing a role of social media, I believe, in two ways in cases like this. There is some element of organizing that appears to be going on through, for instance, Facebook or comparable sites. And I think even more importantly, what we're really seeing is solidarity with the activists. And particularly around Tunisia, you saw the postings from people in Egypt and Yemen and Algeria basically saying, yes, we're with you. And I think that particularly that regional solidarity did play a role, particularly when there's that point that you don't know whether the police are going to come in and just kill everyone. And that solidarity, I think, was really important.
How have the respective governments responded to the increased use of social media?
We know the Tunisian government tried to shut down sites, tried to absolutely censor access to the internet and what was going on, and actually tried to unregister the accounts of people who were using their email accounts or their membership on something like Facebook.
Is this the case where the poor are unable to effectively use social media, such as Facebook, in these regions of the world?
Well, that's an interesting question, because while the percent of people in some of the poorer countries who have access to the internet is low relative to a place like European countries where it's almost 100%, they're using the technologies that they can access. So the use of text messaging on cell phones, for instance, in Africa, has been a very effective organizing tool. In fact, again, Amnesty International did work with this in our work in Kibera, the slum or informal settlement around Nairobi. So they're using the technology that they do have access to, and of course mobile technology doesn't require a huge infrastructure or a lot of money to work.
We will not be silenced, whether you're a Christian, whether you're a Muslim, whether you're an atheist. You will demand your goddamn rights, and we will have our rights, one way or the other. We will never be silenced.
Here you actually see my blog.
Dr. Nazar Al-Sayad has written blogs and books about Egypt and is the head of the Center of Middle Eastern Studies at the University of California, Berkeley. Despite the Egyptian government's effort to shut down the internet during protest, he was still able to communicate with his family and friends, being updated about recent protest activities.
Did it stop the protests? Absolutely not. We know for a fact that it did not. Did it bring about a situation where people could not communicate with each other? Yes, to some extent, although those who were determined managed to communicate with each other.
Social networking analysts say that sites like Facebook and Twitter allow for protesters to organize without a designated leader.
I couldn't do anything as an individual, but together we could do something. And it was the profiles and the richness that's built into the service inside of Facebook that really gave it that galvanizing movement.
Professor Al-Sayad says it's wrong to call it a Facebook revolution.
Because it is a revolution by ordinary people who happen to use Facebook as the technology of communication, and they would have resorted to other technologies had Facebook not been available.
Still, many believe that the ongoing protest in the Middle East is providing us with the blueprint as to how to successfully use social networking to elicit change.